This is Performance Delivered, Insider Secrets for Digital Marketing Success with Steffen Horst.
Welcome to part 3 of our 3-part series on how small businesses can grow through digital advertising. In part 1 of the series, we discussed Google Search, particularly PMax, and how advertisers can use those solutions to grow their business. In part 2, we talked about additional Google products, such as Dimension and local service ads, looked at other advertising solutions for small businesses, such as Instagram and Facebook, Amazon's and Microsoft solutions, and finally discussed the pitfalls they should avoid when running advertising. Today, we're going to spend some time talking about the business operations side of advertising. Here to speak to me again is Navah Hopkins, brand evangelist at Optmyzr, an award-winning turnkey PPC management suite built on a foundation of barrier smashing AI and machine learning power. Navah has over 15 years of digital marketing experience and has worked for companies such as WordStream, Hennessy Digital, and Atsuma. She has a passion for innovation, fueled by a hybrid strategic partnership, data analysis, and consumer engagement. Navah is a serial entrepreneur, SEO and SEM philosopher, blogger, content strategist, and bounty hunter on the business development dance floor. And as we learned during the last 2 episodes, she's also a huge Star Wars fan and a mother to 3 dogs.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for letting this be a 3-part series so we can gradually peel the onion on all of the things from marketing to the various stories.
I know. It would have been hard to squeeze it all into one episode.
Yeah.
Probably would have, even for the first 2 episodes, I think we could have gone much, much further than we did. I think the half an hour that we recorded for each. But, if you haven't had a chance to listen to part 1 and 2, make sure to head over your solution that you use to listen to podcasts and listen to part 1 and 2. It's definitely worth it. Now, today, we talk about business operations. So, Navah, platforms like Google and Meta make it relatively easy for businesses to set up and launch advertising campaigns. Why is diving straight into setting up campaigns not a good idea? What are the core questions you need to answer before you start spending money?
So I don't know if that little is going to make it into the final cut, but one of the reasons why it's truly a mistake to jump right into campaign management as opposed to taking a step back and looking at your business metrics is you need a source of truth. You need kind of rounding force of what does success mean and what does failure mean. And if you don't know what success and failure looks like, you're never going to be able to set up a meaningful, scalable campaign. So what do I mean by success? Part of this is what is the value of the customer? Part of this is conversion rates, and do different devices, different markets have different conversion rates, i.e., if someone speaks to me on the phone, are they more likely to become a customer than through form fill? But then we also want to think about the value of the customer. So I shared on LinkedIn, there was actually a great story of a non-alcoholic spirit where the whole point is this kind of herbal tincture, and it looks delicious, that has been following me for, a month and a half. And I kept getting sticker shock at the $45 a bottle, this price. But for whatever reason, I got a different ad on a different day talking about gut health and the actual health benefits. And suddenly that $45 didn't seem so expensive. Suddenly it was perfect. I'm like, oh, this is great. And then I actually ended up handing over $153 when I was taken aback by 45. And all it took was that simple pivoting of this is kind of a fun trend, or go alcohol free, to here's gut health and here's like go be healthy. So part of what that brand understood very well is that they know what are the points of consideration that are going to push a customer to buy, and what price point do they come in for each of those different considerations. So they represented absolutely an alcohol-free kind of trend, like let's go alcohol-free. And they're priced, in my opinion, on the more expensive side. But when you start getting into health, suddenly if you're comparing the price of $45 a bottle of something compared to the healthcare system and how expensive that can be, $45 is nothing. And in this case, it ended up being even cheaper than $45 a bottle because I bought so many. So part of that business metric is thinking about who are your customers and at what price point can you get them for each of the reasons they might want to engage with you. But then also understanding, when is someone a fit, but they're not a fit yet. So I should let them go into the ether and kind of explore, versus when is someone truly important. Because when you're building your campaigns, you're ultimately building campaigns for cold leads and warm leads, and budgeting inappropriately is going to be a big waste of money. There's a whole bunch of other considerations we can get into, but I think that's a good place to start.
Yeah. So then what are the minimum KPIs that someone should have? Just to get started, because, as you said, there are a number of KPIs that we can pull, right? But what's the minimum business owner that wants to advertise should have?
Bare minimum, the absolute, do not even do advertising unless you have this. What is your customer worth? Mm-hmm. And how many customers are you currently getting, and where could that number grow to without any operational change? And those two questions should be the guiding force behind every single thing you do. If you're in marketing, it can be very tempting to just get more leads, get more customers. But if those customers are coming in at a value that you don't make enough money to pay for the advertising, or if you don't have the support system in place to actually service the leads, you're going to burn and churn. So you might get 1 month of monthly recurring revenue, or MRR, or you might get a one-time purchase, but then you get a whole bunch of angry reviews because you didn't service the customer, or you didn't ship it out on time, or it was out of stock, or whatever. So just bear in mind that you need to really be honest with yourself of, what is my customer worth? And that'll influence what auction prices or cost per clicks you can go after. It'll influence how much of what type of lead you'll go after. But then you also want to consider, on the volume of lead question, do you need leads coming in to all of the parts of your business, or to only some parts? So a very common local question is, I might have 10 locations. One location is crushing it. They're doing great. I have another location that's in the middle of nowhere and needs all the leads. And I have another location that's close to them and they're doing okay, but they're not doing perfect. You might want to actually combine the two and just know that you can't perfectly guarantee that the location getting no leads definitively get budget, but they'll at least get the halo effect of the volume coming from the location doing kind of medium. And then the location that is crushing it, you might decide that you want to borrow a little bit of budget from them because they can withstand that loss of leads to support the parts of your business that can't. So just being mindful of kind of thinking about the parts of your business as children. Yeah. You love all of your children. Every part of your family is worthy of love. But sometimes if someone is sick, you give a little bit more TLC to the sick child, i.e. the part of your business that needs more leads, more volume, and you trust that the others are okay. Like they'll make do.
The same applies to what you just said. The same applies to, if you look at it from a product perspective or service perspective. If you have a product that might not be as expensive, so advertising might not be worth doing just because you can't hit the point. So to be positive, you might not advertising on that product, or you give it a little bit just to kind of get it started. And then with the volume in the long run, it might actually be more efficient, basically. So you talked about monthly recurring revenue. For the calculation of what's the value of a customer, are you someone that goes more with the one-time revenue generated, or are you looking at the lifetime value when it comes to kind of establishing the cost per?
So it truly depends on the state of the business and the maturity of the numbers. So for example, Optmyzr, we are a software subscription. People are going to pay a monthly price for us, or they'll pay an annual price, but there's a built-in assumption that there's a lifetime value. Mm-hmm. There are other purchases, or there are other maybe loss leaders where I might think of it as, I get my foot in the door and then maybe I can come back. Mm-hmm. So it really does depend on the business. I think it's really important to be mindful that if you are going for the one-time purchase, you have to be a lot stricter about your cost per acquisitions and your ROAS. Whereas when you have the luxury of being able to track that customer and follow their months or years long journey with you, you can absolutely be a little bit more forgiving of the individual cost per acquisition or ROAS because the lifetime value is so great. And I think one of the things that's really powerful that ad platforms have done is they've made it much easier to share that information. Now, a real big concern, and it's a valid concern that some businesses have, is I don't necessarily want to share all of my profit margin information with ad platforms that control the prices that I pay per click, or they control my advertising spend. So for that, I say it is a totally valid concern. This is where some of the concepts we discussed in our earlier sessions around bid caps and bid floors can be really helpful, because you can force the issue that a bid is not allowed to exceed a certain amount, but you can still take advantage of those really powerful profit over ad spend, return on ad spend, factoring in that lifetime value. All ad platforms are moving towards that. It's just that you have to know it, you have to be able to track it, and that requires a healthy CRM that requires just a healthy spreadsheet that you're able to track that information. But it also requires trust and actually sharing that information with the ad platform. And it is totally fair if you don't. Just acknowledge that that means that you're not going to have as many bidding tools at your disposal.
Yeah. If a business just starts out, some of these numbers that we usually would ask of a client to give us might not be available. They don't know how often someone will rebuy, for example. How do you approach those situations with clients when they don't have a full picture of the core KPIs that we ideally would love to have?
So it's funny. The start of my career, I was actually called a drill sergeant, or like a PPC drill sergeant, because I was very famous or infamous for breaking people down and being like, you have to have this information. We're not even going to do any marketing. Like, you're not getting it until you have this information. We're going to go find it. And like, you need to come up with some number. And it's funny because I would do it nicely. Like, it was not rude, but everyone really appreciated kind of getting that, no, you're going to hurt yourself, like a protective mama bear. Like, no, don't touch the fire. Like, let's step back. Let's make sure that we're prepared. We're safe. We have our numbers to go into the PPC piece. But I do think it's really important that we get comfortable telling clients and stakeholders no on marketing when they don't have the information. Just like it's really important that we get them comfortable with the idea that they won't have the amount of tracking information and reporting information that they might have been used to. So one of the reasons I think the operations conversation is so important is that this is one of the areas where the business owner should know everything. And if they don't know everything, that's a sign of either they aren't very good at business, and so they likely aren't going to be a very good client, and so we likely are not going to want to do business with them anyway, or it's a sign that they haven't thought about it from a marketing standpoint, that they just haven't put two and two together, that they're important. And there's an opportunity to build a really meaningful, kind of scalable partnership between the operations and the marketing. And when those two are talking to each other, you have boundless opportunity. The moment that finance doesn't understand why the marketing bill went up, or that customer leads are dwindling, like if there's the moment there's unknowns, that's when you have friction. So as much transparency as possible is good.
Yeah. And I have to say, I mean, we're talking about local and small businesses. I have conversations with mid-sized, even enterprise companies sometimes, and they don't have the numbers, and it's shocking when I then ask, so how do you operate? How do you determine dollars spent in addition makes sense for your business? So there's nothing to be scared of. And if you're in business, only work with an agency, see how your agency can help you with identifying that information. Now, let's take it to the next step. When you launch your campaign, obviously there are different targets that you can go after. You could just drive traffic. You could sell products. If you sell products, you could offer services, so you generate leads. What is required to measure the success, especially of the lead generation and the sales part?
For measuring, it's tricky because on the one hand, it's really tempting to just measure things off of, did person become a customer or did person not? But you also want to make sure that you're auditing your sales and your customer success team and hearing how they're responding. I actually had a great conversation with a client who was letting me know that they were concerned about the lack of lead flow. So we listened to a call together, and their own intake person actually said that they don't take the case that they would have taken. And it was like, this is crazy. Like, what's going on? And so I think one of the most important action items every business owner needs to put on their checklist is to do random quality control for calls that come in for your intake team, for your customer success team, your sales team, and just see how are your people answering. Now, if it's you that's answering and you're kind of auditing yourself, I would be kind of honest with yourself of, are you answering the person if they email within 90 seconds? If the answer is no, probably need to look at that. And that answer could be an automatic reply saying, we have received your email. We are very excited to learn more about your project. Here's a calendar to book a time with me, or you can let me know if you have any initial questions. Like it can be something as simple as that. But if there is no connect right away, you risk the chance of losing that sale. On a phone call, there's a general rule that if you do not connect within 20 seconds of the phone starting to ring, you have probably lost the person because they're not going to wait for infinite rings. And you also want to be mindful of how much wait time do you subject the person to once they have connected with the person. So I've done a lot of work in legal, and one of the biggest issues with lead quality actually can be answered by how good does the intake team respond to the customer. And if you don't have a good intake team, it doesn't matter how good the marketing account is. It doesn't matter how good your SEO is, your PPC, all of that, you're going to fail. So you want to make sure that you're auditing that. Now, talking about things like software or other products, services, less on the local side, it's a little bit more important that you're really reading the notes of your sales team and that your sales team is being held accountable for honest and transparent notes. So if they are fudging the numbers a little bit, or if they're not quite correct, then yes, you need to make those adjustments. I know this seems very labor intensive, but this is one of those few moments that AI is not going to be able to replace this. Your accountability for your business is critical.
I want to add to that. I've seen what you just said multiple times. We used to have a workspace in San Francisco, and a month in, we were like, wow, we're really killing it. There are leads going through. And then at the next call, the client was like, well, I haven't signed any new contacts. It's like, what happened to all the leads? So we went into the call tracking system that we have, and 90% of the leads ended up in a voicemail. And then we said, so when did you call them back? Well, most of them 2-3 days later. I'm like, well, you know what? At that point, they've forgotten about you. I mean, you're not the only co-working space in San Francisco.
Yeah.
This is literally money wasted. If you use a phone number to kind of send your calls from ads to, make sure there's someone that actually is able to pick up. And that person also needs to be able to have a proper conversation and route the call in the right direction, or intake, as you said, information so that the next step can be set up. If that's not happening, you're wasting money, and it's better to stop what you're doing and kind of reassess the situation.
And that's where that question of how many leads are you currently getting and where can that number grow to without any operational change comes from. Yeah. If you don't know how many leads you're getting in and where that number can grow to without you hiring more people, you should not be doing paid media. What you should be doing is spending a month auditing your processes. And I know that might seem like a really frustrating thing to hear. And like, you need more business. You need more business. Invest the time now when you probably have the a little bit of leeway so that you can really rock it out in Q4.
Last point to add on to this is also make sure that you look at, when you're driving leads, what does the sales funnel look like? And then not just from lead to sale, but there are steps in between, right? You get a lead, it needs to be marketing qualified, sales qualified, becomes an opportunity. And at some point, hopefully, it becomes a new client, or whatever steps your company has. But make sure you understand what the conversion rates are between each of those steps, because if any of these points are off, the conversion rates, there might be something not working. And you might not see it if you just look at the first touch point and the last kind of conversion point, that the system is off, basically. One thing that obviously is also important is conversion tracking. As I said earlier, when you run traffic campaigns, which means you just want to get people to your site to grow your brand or the awareness of your brand, it might not necessarily be needed. But when you do sales and lead gen, it is more important. And can you dive a little bit deeper in that, Navah? And
on the value of conversion tracking?
Yeah, and what do they get with that?
So it's interesting. Conversion tracking is important and useful as you will make it useful. So conversion tracking has the potential to be the most powerful tool in your arsenal. It is how you speak to the algorithms. It's how you know what's working. It's everything on transparency of what your campaigns are doing. But on the flip side, if you're not going to be accountable for correct implementation of conversion tracking, or if you're going to track everything under the sun and basically tracking every action, so no action is really special, it becomes a little bit less valuable. So you want to think about, A, does your business generate enough volume with the leads that you're getting to hit a minimum of 50 conversions in a 30-day period? If the answer is no, you may want to consider some more smaller actions just on the path to profit and victory. With that said, though, conversions, just a refresher, are actions that you have said are useful that are tracked by placing a pixel on your site, usually through a Google Tag Manager, which kind of holds all the tags. So if you know that you're not going to hit the 50, set additional actions. If you know that you'll hit the 50 just fine, make sure that you're only tracking what's useful. But you also want to make sure that you're connecting your CRM systems into the ad platforms, because that's going to be a way to shore up the conversion tracking. In today's world, we cannot have perfect conversion tracking. I think it's roughly 70% is considered accurate, and then the rest is modeled out. So you just want to be mindful that in this world where we don't have perfect conversion tracking, where we don't have perfect reporting, use it as much as you can trust and use, but also know that the business you're seeing is your source of truth. And it is always worth asking your customers, how did they find you? Because it's also useful to understand, even if you know via UTM or that little parameter that gets put onto the URL at the end that someone came from Google Ads, but they say they saw a billboard, that's just useful for you to know that there was an assist from the billboard that got you that lead, and vice versa. Like, you might have a call tracking number on a billboard and they might say, well, they saw you on Google, and so they called that number.
Yeah, and that obviously is important because you want to get a full visibility of if you run multiple channels, what do all of these channels do to basically contribute to your bottom line, to your end goal, right? Whether it's sale, lead, or whatever you define. The last point I have here on my list to talk about is many states these days, and in Europe, there's GDPR, and it kind of regulates what data can be captured and in what way and used, you name it. But many states in the US have kind of started to implement state laws to manage that. Here in California, I think we have one of the stricter laws in place. What do advertisers need to do to comply with privacy policies and don't get into trouble, basically?
Yeah. So the number one thing is having a transparent and functional cookie consent banner at the bottom or the top or wherever you want to put it before the user engages. Having a little snippet of text that says, by clicking agree, by accessing this site, you agree to our terms. That's not going to cut it. That will get you fined. That will absolutely get you in trouble. You need to give the option to reject cookies. You need to give the option to accept cookies. And it's in the most ideal state, you give the option to see all of the cookies possible, and then you would pick and choose what you want. I think another thing that's really important to factor in for form fills is we kind of have gotten lazy that you have a form fill and it may or may not include a little checkbox saying, I consent to you using my email for marketing. That is what's needed to use the email for marketing. If you don't actually get the consent, you can't use it. They only consented to get in touch with you. They didn't consent for you to market. Now, it is worth explaining to your customers why you might need that information. So for example, a lot of people will take the emails of their existing customers, put them into a list, and then exclude them from their marketing efforts because they don't want to talk to people that they've already sold. It's really important that you're communicating with your customers why you want certain bits of information and how you're going to use that information. The final thing that's really, really, really important is usability. Not enough people talk about accessibility and usability in websites. And in order for a website to truly pass as accessible, you need to have decent contrast. You need to acknowledge that color blindness is a thing. Like, don't set yourself up for failure. Acknowledge that serif fonts are harder to read than sans serif. And so when you're designing your site, when you're picking your fonts, just bear that in mind, that serif fonts can work as accents, but setting your whole page as a serif is setting yourself up to have a tough time to read. And then finally, just bear in mind that video and audio isn't always desired the moment the screen loads. So videos can be great. They can be super engaging. You may want to be careful having things autoplay when someone enters the site.
Now, that was my last question. Is there anything, Navah, that we haven't talked about from a business operations perspective, but we should?
And I would love to hear your perspective on this. It's really important to consider, when do you have to do serious auditing of your operations? Like, at what are your thresholds for, okay, stop all marketing, let's just work on business? Or does that point ever exist? Like, what do you think?
You know what? I want to believe, do a really good job to not even start spending money until certain information are available. You know, when we work with a lot of technology companies and SaaS companies where lead gen is kind of the goal. So I want to have these information we talked about earlier. The KPIs is like, what's your lifetime value, the return on investment you're looking for, to do a waterfall calculation of what's the cost per sale, what's the cost per lead, and then looking at, are there information on the sales funnel side for each step available? If not, what is there? And then we also look at, quite often, what the quality of the leads are. Because what I see a lot is like agencies coming and saying, I can give you more leads. But more leads, and you said that earlier, right? More leads is not necessarily the solution. It might be the quality of leads that is the issue. Forget about the fact that they might not handle the lead properly. So we always work through the process of what we think is ideal and sets them up for success in the first place. We look at, have they implemented their analytics system correctly? I mean, many of the companies we work with have Google Analytics in place. Is it set up properly? Is it collecting data correctly? Is it displaying data correctly? So kind of the basic, that business decisions are made on the right data collected, but also from a marketing perspective, you want to be able to collect the right information and make decisions on that. So those are just some simple things. And then as we get started and help our clients to implement things, there will be checkpoints to make sure that we look at, are the conversions that we assume for each of these steps, are they consistent with what we assumed they would be? Are there outliers there? And then if there are outliers, why are there outliers? And then we dive a little bit deeper into it. Luckily, we haven't had a situation where we had to say, well, let's step back and stop completely. I think because we do a lot of upfront work to set the campaign up from a business operations perspective for success. And if we don't have that, we don't really like to engage with clients, because what that leads to is very short engagement cycles. And the client usually is unhappy with the results because it's not clear whether it's a success or not, or we don't have all the right information.
And it goes back to what I mentioned at the beginning. What is success and what is failure? If you don't know what success and failure are, you're never going to be happy. And who wants to work with someone who's never going to be happy? Like, there has to be a point where we achieve success and we throw a party because we did so great. Or that we acknowledge that we didn't do great, so we pivot and we move to something else. We don't just keep going at the same thing that's failing.
Navah, it has been a pleasure having you be a guest here on the last 3 episodes. I really enjoyed our conversation, starting with Google Search and PMax, and then going over all the other advertising solutions available for local and small businesses to advertise, to grow their business. And obviously today, the conversation about the business operations side of things. If people want to find out more about you, want to find out about Optmyzr, how can they get in touch?
Well, of course, you can come check out Optmyzr.com. We also have our ppctownhall.com, although we're reimagining PPC Town Hall, so stay tuned for that. I'm on LinkedIn quite a bit. I'm also on TikTok and Threads. You can check out Optmyzr on X as well as LinkedIn and TikTok. We also do quite a number of blogging and speaking. I'm the Ask the PPC for SCJ, and of course, out and about. So just come say hi if you have questions. I'm happy to help.
There are many people to catch you, basically, and have a conversation with you. Perfect. Well, thanks everyone for listening. If you like the Performance Development podcast, please subscribe to us and leave a review on iTunes or your favorite podcast application. To find out more about Symphonic Digital, please visit us at symphonicdigital.com or follow us on X at Symphonic HQ. Thanks again and see you next time.
Performance Delivered is sponsored by Symphonic Digital. Discover audience-focused and data-driven digital marketing solutions for small and medium businesses at symphonicdigital.com.